copy up by holding it. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Lieutenant Commander Chris Bodenhafer. I was asked to come here to speak a little about Memorial Day as a recently retired Navy veteran. Commander, thank you for the invitation. Mayor Waters, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come here today. I hope together we can honor our fallen brothers and sisters on this hallowed day. That nation which respects and honors its dead shall ever be respected and honored itself. That's a quote from Brevet Lieutenant Colonel Edmund B. Whitman, who was the superintendent of national cemeteries immediately following the Civil War. In the waning years of the Civil War, around 1861 to 1865, and immediately afterwards, communities in the North and South, black and white, decorated soldiers' graves with floral honors on springtime decoration days. The practice of strewing flowers on graves has been documented from classic Roman times to Western Europe in the 19th century and continues today. On May 5th of 1868, the Grand Army of the Republic, a politically powerful organization of the Union veterans led by Major General John A. Logan, issued General Order Number 11. This issuance formally established Decoration Day, on which the nation would remember its war dead and decorate their graves with flowers. Although accounts regarding Decoration Day are varied, historians believe this is the beginning of what we now know as Memorial Day. Major General Logan's order was regarding Union soldiers lost in battle, and the order was given to active military, stating that posts and comrades will in their own way arrange such fitting services and testimonials of respect as circumstances may permit. These services were to be held on May 30th. This date is not an anniversary of any battle or of significance. It was chosen because it's the time of year when flowers would be in bloom and thus readily available. Historical records indicate that those in the South also held similar ceremonies. Americans across the nation began holding tributes to honor the approximately 620,000 soldiers who lost their lives, about 2% of the population at the time. These early observances typically included decorating graves with flowers, reciting prayers, and paying respect to the fallen. The tradition carried on for nearly a century. Post-World War I, the day's focus expanded from only commemorating those lost in the Civil War to American military members lost in all wars. By this time, most states recognized Memorial Day, but it was not recognized by the federal government until 1966. On May 26, 1966, with Presidential Proclamation 3727, President Johnson proclaimed, "Now, therefore, I, Lyndon B. Johnson, President of the United States of America, do hereby designate Memorial Day, Monday, May 30th, 1966, as a day of prayer for permanent peace, and I designate the hour beginning in each locality at 11 o'clock in the morning of that day as a time to unite in such a prayer." This marked the centennial of what was believed to be the first community-wide organized celebration, and President Johnson directed that those employed in the several executive departments of the government are to unite with their fellow citizens in paying a fitting tribute to the memory of these brave men. By 1968, Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, which became effective in 1971. This moved the holiday from the traditional May 30th to the last Monday in May to create a 3-day weekend and solve an ongoing issue with federal government employees' absenteeism during federal holidays. Today, some recognize Memorial Day by the seemingly endless commercials for car sales. Some recognize it as a long weekend to gather with friends and family around the barbecue. The guidance was simple by President Johnson: to honor those we have lost and unite in a prayer of permanent peace. For myself and several others who've seen combat, it sometimes helps to reflect on those friends we have lost and tell their story, so that their memory might live on. I'd like to share a couple of those stories with you now. On October 20th, 2016, I was serving in Iraq with SEAL Team 5 as their intelligence officer and targeting department head, participating in Operation Inherent Resolve. As you can imagine from all the movies, fabled stories, books, and media out there about the SEALs, it was an eventful and busy deployment. Every night was filled with missions set to renew Iraqi government rule to areas that had been captured by ISIS. It was 6 months of sleepless nights and days of planning the next mission. The details of that evening's mission are irrelevant, but suffice to say we were operating throughout the country of Iraq, and we were making significant gains daily. Iraq was being stabilized. Near the town of Bashik, about 10 miles north of Mosul, a group was behind enemy forward line of troops advising Peshmerga forces during their offensive on Mosul. The unit they were supporting came under small arms fire. Chief Petty Officer Explosive Ordnance Disposal Jason Finan was moving to a better position when his vehicle struck an improvised explosive device, according to official statements. I was in the Joint Operations Center, or the JOC, that night. We were monitoring communications as the events unfolded. Chief Finan was in what's known as an MRAP vehicle with a group of others when they realized that they had found themselves in a suspected IED minefield. Chief Finan knew that it was his responsibility as the explosive ordnance tech to keep his brothers safe in that vehicle. These vehicles are heavily armored, thus, and with the equipment that is mounted on the outside, very difficult to just back up. So there was no field of view to help out with that operation. And Chief Finan did what he needed to do, opened the door to be able to get a clear view outside. As he was leaning out of the vehicle, it struck and detonated another IED. The JOC went silent as communications flowed in about the explosion and reports of casualties and support needs. That was when we all heard the worst possible term you could ever hear over comms: one expectant. In military operations, expectant, often labeled as T4 or black tag, refers to a triage category. This is for casualties with extremely severe injuries who are unlikely to survive, given available resources. These patients are not abandoned, but receive comfort care, while resources are prioritized to other individuals who have a higher chance of survival. We knew we were about to lose someone. A medical evacuation helicopter took Chief to the military medical hospital in Erbil. We later found out that he was the fourth casualty in Iraq since operations had begun in 2014 against ISIS. I encourage everyone here today to take a moment this afternoon to think about those we have lost in direct combat operations, as well as those we have lost as secondary effect of their service to that permanent peace President Johnson spoke of. Not all casualties of war are losses in the heat of battle. As I was preparing for today, I reflected on the different types of casualties of war. Battlefield deaths are the first on most people's minds, especially during Memorial Day. Training incidents, I would argue, would be the second. I'm reminded of two young women we lost in Whidbey Island, Washington, shortly after my retirement from the Naval Air Station there. Lieutenant Serena Wildman and Lieutenant Commander Lindsay Evans died when their electronic attack aircraft went down near Mount Rainier in October of 2024. Last year, I was pleased to note that the National American Legion Veterans Day speech included remarks regarding this tremendous loss and these two amazing young women. This was also when I realized that October is apparently not the best month in the history of my career. Another incident in October, on October 5th of 2018, Chief Gabe Lindsay called me to go with him to the lumber mill. Hang with me, this is military related. I remember this because it was my daughter's birthday. And and I was supposed to be getting party favors that morning. But it was 0800, and I had some time. Not only that, but we'd been waiting for this day for a few months. Chief had been waiting a few years. Not to bore you all with the details, but it kind of frames the situation. You see, Chief had a maple tree he had cut down on his property 2 years prior. By allowing it to sit for a long period of time, he was hoping to get what's called a spalting to the grain of the wood. If you don't know what spalting is, I encourage you to look it up, but suffice to say, as woodworkers, it's something that we always look forward to and takes Mother Nature a while to produce. He had agreed to call me when the tree was going to get milled, so we could see how it turned out as it unfolded. It was an amazing experience. I decided to go, figuring I could get the party favors on the way home. How much trouble could I get in anyways? My daughter was turning 6. She'd probably not remember. We made plans. We watched as the lumber came off bit by bit in beautiful slabs. We planned on making a dining room table for his family in a year or two when the wood had finally seasoned and was prepped. I made him give me a slab he was going to burn as scrap for heat in his home because I thought it would make a beautiful coffee table. It did, by the way, and it still sits in my home today. On November 20th of that same year, Chief Lindsay ended his life. 46 days after making plans to build a table, 46 days after seeing the culmination of a few years of waiting for that wood to spalt, to dream about what it might become. I'll never forget the following Monday when I came in to get briefed on what happened during the all-hands emergency meeting that the Commodore had called, only to find out from a colleague that a chief had committed suicide. I was devastated when I heard Gabe's name. I will never forget my Commodore cry as he spoke at Gabe's funeral. It's the only time in my career I witnessed a superior officer lose his medal in front of his people. And I would still call him one of the strongest officers I've ever worked for. Gabe had a beautiful family, always had a smile on his face, and was a chief that others looked up to and modeled their careers from. We were all questioning why. Why would a man with future plans decide to take that all away? Why would a man with a beautiful family take away their husband, their father? Why would someone that had spent their life, had a career in the Navy, and had made it through the enlisted ranks to Chief Petty Officer give that all up? Why? Suicide is one of those secondary losses I believe can be added to the list, including combat casualties and those lost in training incidents. We continue to carry the question with some, is it acceptable to remember victims of suicide on a day generally established to remember those we have lost to wartime causes? In my research, I was unable to find any specific official guidance on this matter, but I would like to offer some reflective thoughts on the topic of suicide, specifically with a focus on PTSD. The diagnosis of PTSD is a relatively new one, as it was only established in psychiatric standards in 1980. However, occurrences of PTSD have been recorded in literature as far back as Homer's Iliad, Shakespeare's Henry IV, and Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. PTSD has gone by many names. During the Civil War, it was referred to as soldier's heart or irritable heart, also Da Costa syndrome, believed to be a cardiac issue caused by overstimulation of the heart's nerves. It was believed that it always presented itself as anxiety. By World War I, it was known as shell shock or war neurosis. World War II introduced combat stress or battle fatigue. During this early history of diagnosis in the U.S., it was believed that West was the best treatment. This fit the priority mission of returning the soldiers to the battlefield. Later, medications were applied to help relieve some of the symptoms. It It wasn't until 1952 that the DSM-1, that is the manual for all psychological diagnoses, was published and included gross stress reduction. This diagnosis was proposed for people who were relatively normal but had symptoms from a traumatic event such as disaster or combat. It was removed in the next edition of the DSM in 1968. By 1980, the diagnosis of PTSD was returned to the DSM in edition 3 and was primarily as a result of research conducted on returning Vietnam veterans, Holocaust survivors, and survivors of sexual assault. It took until 2013 to establish that PTSD is relatively common. Recent data shows that 4% of American men and 10% of American women will be diagnosed with PTSD at some point in their lifetimes. An important change to the diagnosis of PTSD is it no longer is an anxiety disorder. PTSD is sometimes associated with other mood states like depression, reckless or angry behavior rather than anxiety. So PTSD has now been placed in a new category, trauma and stressor-related disorders, and includes 4 different types of symptoms: relieving the traumatic event, avoiding situations that are reminders of the event, negative changes in beliefs or feelings, and feeling keyed up, also called hyperarousal or overreactive to some situations. Most people experience some of these symptoms after a traumatic event. So PTSD is not diagnosed unless all 4 types of symptoms last for at least a month and cause significant distress or problems with day-to-day functioning. I share all of these statistics and history of the diagnosis of PTSD to bring into perspective the reality that we have only come to our most recent conclusions within the past 13 years. PTSD is not limited to veterans, but veterans continue to be one of the most significantly affected demographics. This year we celebrate this great nation's 250th birthday, and arguably one of the most significant issues affecting our military has only been in focus for the past 13 years. I encourage everyone in attendance today to think about their loved ones, think about themselves. We live in an era where information is readily available. The stigma of mental health is slowly being removed as we recognize the severity of these hidden injuries. Resources are available, and there is no shame in asking the question, brother or sister, are you okay? We must look out for one another. Our service didn't end when we took off our uniforms, especially our service to each other. Call it a swim buddy, a battle buddy, a warrior companion, any of the various names they pushed on us while we were in training. Continue to have each other's backs. That was the point. Continue to remember our brothers and sisters who lost all hope and found no other way out than to die by their own hands. These deaths are preventable. I will close today's remarks with a quote from the National Archive. Today, let us recognize our freedom to attend our church of choice or to not attend, to express our opinions, to gather to discuss our beliefs and values, to be able to read the exchange of information openly in the press, to be able to defend ourselves, and to understand that we have a system of justice. It is important to acknowledge that those freedoms are ours because of men, women, and their families who stepped forward to defend it. Memorial Day is for them, all of them. It is our duty to remember that gift that they have given us. Thank you.